Hey there, gang. What's the scariest thing you can think of? Is it spiders? Is it ghosts? Is it the inevitable march towards oblivion? For some of us, it's having our favorite format shaken to its core. Welcome to Head Game.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is the Zombie Apocalypse, and ever since these cards got banned, they just call me Steve.
Hello again, friends and opponents. I'm Jeterex, recently certified to lead a horse to water, but surprisingly not to make them drink. Out on the farm, they still call me Tim.
Thank you for joining us today on the Head Games Commander podcast, where we talk about the Magic the Gathering Commander format. Tim, what's the plan for today?
So there is still a commander format. So despite what everybody might be thinking right now,
Uh,
today we're going to talk about the most buzzworthy thing in the world of Magic right now: the recent commander format bans. We're going to set the stage a little bit by talking about how these decisions are made, decisions for the commander format. We're going to talk about what was reported by the decision-making body as to why they made these bans. We're going to talk a little bit about the kind of the fallout and what has happened since then, and then finally we're going to talk a bit about what do we think about this? What's our take on the whole situation?
this is future Zombie Apocalypse here. Just wanted to let everyone have a heads up with what's going on. This episode was recorded literally 12 hours before the RC committee gave control to Wizards of the Coast. So we might talk about that in a future episode. I'm not too sure yet, but just as a heads up, all this information that we're talking about is assuming that the rules committee was still a thing. Thank you. Let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. So the first thing we're going to talk about is who makes the decisions for the commander ban list. So there's two, I'm going to quote unquote say governing bodies. The first one is the Commander Rules Committee, or the CRC, and they're the ones that actually make the decisions on what cards get banned. It is, I think, five individuals who are a part of this committee that make these decisions. They decide what's the healthiest thing for the format. And then there's also the Commander Advisory Group, which is also known as the CAG. And they're just a group of streamers, content creators, podcast makers, anyone that's like really well known in like the Commander echelon of people. And they are just to help advise, make decisions, or help make the decisions or gather information for the rules committee to help make them make their decisions for them.
It might be worth noting that this is different than all of the other Magic formats because Wizards of the Coast controls the other formats in a more direct manner. And because Commander or EDH, however you want to refer to it, was kind of a format born of a playing group,
Yep.
born of the players, and that Wizards just at some point said, "Oh, we like how much money we can make from this, so we're going to take we're going to take it over a little bit." But they wanted the optics to be that the community still had a big hand in how this format was being managed, which is why we have an independent rules committee.
Yeah.
Made up of people who are known in the community but are not necessarily employees of Wizards of the Coast. It's not the company itself making the choices. So, and we've talked before on our podcast about what makes it casual versus competitive. All of the other formats are competitive, other than the ones you play at your kitchen table. But Commander has always kind of been spiritually a casual format.
Right. So I guess the next thing we're going to talk about are the cards themselves that got banned and the reasonings they got banned from the words of the Commander Rules Committee. So Tim, why don't you go
So
ahead and get us started on that?
Yeah, we're. I'm not gonna. You can go and read it. All you have to do is look a little bit on the internet for the for the actual reasons that they printed. I'm just going to highlight a couple of specific pieces of each of them. So the first card that they banned is Mana Crypt. So this is a 0 casting cost artifact that you can tap for 2 colorless mana, and then on your upkeep you flip a coin, and if you win the flip, you take no damage, and if you lose it, you take 3.
Correct.
So the reasoning that they gave for Mana Crypt is unsurprising. It is because it is fast mana, because it is a 0 mana rock that comes down on turn 1 or 2 and creates such an incremental value over the game that it's not just about the explosive start, but also if it is not dealt with, that 3 damage, that maybe taking 3 damage is not as impactful of a loss in a 40 life format, making it even more powerful in Commander than it is in other formats.
Turns out
The
one and
second
a
card
half
is
life. Turns out 1.5 life every turn is not a lot when you start at 40. So
it's true. And the second card is Jeweled Lotus, 0 casting cost artifact. Again, sacrifice Jeweled Lotus, add 3 mana of any one color, spend this mana only to cast your commander. For those who aren't familiar with the Magic format, why are you listening to our podcast?
you should still listen though. Okay, let's make this perfectly clear.
Keep listening,
Keep
but
listening.
I'm confused and intrigued, and we love you. But the famously, Black Lotus is the most broken card in the game because it is a 0 mana artifact that makes you 3 mana. And a couple of years ago, Wizards decided to reprint as close to it as they ever have. In Jeweled Lotus, you can just only spend the mana to get out your commander. And when you have a, 4 or 5 mana commander, this means that maybe you get your commander on turn 1, which is really backbreaking for a lot of decks. So again, fast mana. It's another card that can give you 5 mana on turn 2. It doesn't even need to have a good hand to do it because you're using it to cast your commander.
Right.
Card number 3 is Dockside Extortionist. We are very familiar with old Dockside. This was a card printed in a Commander Precon a couple of years ago and has only subsequently become more and more powerful over the years. 1 in a red, Goblin Pirate 1/2. When it enters, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. The reasoning here, Dockside's been on the border for years, they say. They've shied away from acting in the past because the card has scaled well with the power level of the table. So if it's a lower power table, you're not getting as much out of it. Higher power is more. But it's a frequent contributor to the more egregious snowballing starts.
Oh.
It ultimately creates so much mana advantage for such a small cost that they have, and again, they note here that it's a card they've been watching for years.
Yep. And the last
And then
card.
finally, Nadu Winged Wisdom, recently printed in Modern Horizons 3. It's a 3/4 bird wizard for 1, a green and a blue, has flying, and reads, creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. This ability triggers only twice each turn. So their reasoning behind Nadu, basically, this is one of the one where it's funny because they talked the most about this card, and it's the least controversial because almost everyone agrees that this card was not good for the format. Here's the best summary I could find in their paragraph of words. Part of the problem is the way in which Nadu wins, where it takes a really long time to do non-deterministic sequences that can't be shortcutted and might eventually fizzle out. So it fishbowls and has circular play patterns, so the other people get to watch you play your deck for however long, and you might also not win.
You probably won't, actually.
So, and then they also did talk a little bit about Sol Ring, affirming to the community that here's the direct quote: "We're not banning Sol Ring and have no desire to do so. Yes, based on the criteria we talked about here, it would be banned."
Well,
we know this meets the criteria, and we're also not banning it.
Well, so I can actually agree with this sentiment for this particular card and this particular card alone, because if they ban Sol Ring, absolutely every single precon out of the box is no longer able to be played. And everyone has access to this card. Literally everyone.
I do think that part, and they also mentioned in the Sol Ring conversation, we're not trying to eliminate all explosive starts. It happening every once in a while is exciting. So I can get behind that premise a little bit, that like cutting down on the number of cards that create explosive starts means they're less likely to happen, but not zero. So we may still have those really great games where somebody drops the Sol Ring on one and everybody goes, ah, as we've all come to know and love. So, I mean, I agree. There's so many Sol Rings out there. I don't even know how many I have at this
I
point because
probably
of
have
how many
30 or
precons I
so.
bought. Yeah, I double digits easy. Like I know I've got one in almost every actual deck I've got, which is up to like 13 now.
I'm at 15, I think. So yeah, I hear you on that one.
Yeah, so we've got a bunch. So I'll let you go first on this one. So what do you think about their reasoning with, any of these jump out to you that you want to comment on?
So my first knee-jerk reaction to the ban list when I saw it Monday, probably 20 minutes after it was posted, because holy moly, it was everywhere. My first knee-jerk reaction was like, holy crap, this sucks. Because all these cards do have a tied monetary value.
Right.
And we'll kind of go into that a little bit later, but these cards have a monetary value that like the damage that it could have potentially done to local game stores that just may have recently purchased a whole bunch of these to sell for later, and then they just intrinsically lost, over 50% of their value overnight. Like I feel for those people, but now that I've been sitting on this information for about a week now, honestly, I think every single one of these bans are very healthy for the format. Like looking at Dockside Extortionist, how many times have I seen a Dockside Extortionist just go infinite and win the game immediately? How many times have I been like, oh, we're playing at a lower power level, and then I see a turn 1 Mana Crypt, and it's just like, oh, we're talking about that? And like, and yes, the monetary value thing sucks, but if you were to ask anyone 2 weeks ago, if you were to ban any card in the format, what would you ban? Mana Crypt is on that list, Dockside Distortion is on that list, and maybe Jeweled Lotus. I think Jeweled Lotus is kind of, I want to say, the weakest of them all, because it is very restricted mana. But realistically speaking, Jeweled Lotus should have never have been printed. Dockside Distortion should never have been printed. And Mana Crypt's just an old card. So
right,
they got away with things like that in 1994.
They did.
So I think overall, I think this is very healthy for the format. Yes, I have to, like, I personally lost value-wise, even though I didn't plan on selling these cards. And I still don't think I will. Like, I still have a cool Mana Crypt. Like, I still have these Dockside Distortionists. And yes, I can't use them for Commander, but who knows? They might make a CDH ban list at this point. And if that list becomes available, now I still have them. So yes, I technically lost money, but I didn't lose money because I don't plan on selling these cards anyway.
Sure, and that's that's a kind of a different, to some extent, a different part of the conversation where we start asking that question about the value of cards, and we've talked about this on our own about how, from an economic standpoint, the argument that they shouldn't ban cards because it reduces their values, like they're never going to consider that, right? Like that's not
I don't think they ethically
that's
could.
not their goal. Like they know what their goal is. Right, like they if you talk about like clarity of purpose, the purpose of the Commander Rules Committee is to make the format as healthy as they can.
Yep.
And that's true about all of the ban lists to some extent, to a large extent. That should be their primary driving goal. What cards do we need to remove from the format in order to make it as healthy as possible? So oftentimes when a card gets banned in Standard, it is expensive comparative to that format because it's incredibly powerful. And so bans are almost always going to come with a significant financial shift.
Yep.
So it's that is always going to be a part of it. And in this case, these were some of the more expensive cards in the
Yeah.
format. Well, I mean, they're in the middle of the road when we start talking about the biggest possible hits. But so I got to tell you, like my first reaction was actually, is this real?
Oh
Because
yeah. Oh yeah.
you sent it to me and
Mm-hmm.
you said, I think I have the topic for our next podcast, and
Yep.
you sent me the pick, and I was like, are we in Theory Town? Like, are we going to talk about actual? Because we just talked about this. We just talked about cards that were too good for casual, and so then I
Those
had to
three
look a
cards
little bit,
ended
and I
up
was
on our
like,
list too. That's
that's
what's crazy about it.
well, I think it's appropriate, right? It makes a lot of sense because we looked at these cards and said, if you're playing a Mana Crypt, you aren't you aren't really playing a casual game. Like, that card is so powerful and so much more powerful than what most people can play
Yep.
with, that it's not a casual. And we included Dockside Extortionist on that list, and we're people who play that. Like, I played that card. It's in at least 2 or 3 of my decks at this point. I think 2, but only because I only own 2.
Right.
If
Right.
I had more, I'd probably put it in every single red deck. So, as far as the reasoning goes, their overall premise here, and I think it might be fair to push Nadu to the side and say that card was gonna get it,
Oh, that yeah.
because
Yeah.
it got banned in Modern as fast as cards get banned in Modern,
Yep.
because of how awful of a play pattern it creates. But in that format, being a competitive 1v1 format, it was also overpowering all of the other decks,
Yep.
creating non-deterministic play cycles, et
Mhm.
cetera, et
Oh
cetera.
yeah.
But really, like, it was actually just, it immediately became the most powerful deck in the format. But Nadu was always going to get it because it was. Then they keep doing this every year or two, and maybe it's by design. Who knows? They keep printing, some kind of 3 mana card that is just so broken, and it seems like it's been one a blue and a green a couple of times recently. I don't
Oko.
know. Oko.
Oko.
Uh, and then
Oh.
Uro
Yep.
also had
Yep.
had a similar thing. So anyway, pushing Nadu to the side, the entire kind of idea here seems to be, we feel like these other things, or we feel like these 3 cards in particular contribute to like an overpowered fast mana set. And if we cut these out, these are like the biggest offenders. If we cut these out, it's going to drastically decrease the amount of like crazy fast mana starts that decks get, and make it so that Soul Ring, being the kind of iconic card in the format, Soul Ring is going to be the like exception rather than one among a couple of different cards that will all create it. So they're trying to, it's almost like they're restricting fast mana by
That
cutting out 3 of the 4 most important fast mana pieces that exist.
I think that's a very valid point, but what I want to ask now is, what about other cards that kind of can fit under this umbrella? Cards in particular I'm thinking of are Cabal Coffers, Gaia's Cradle, Ancient Tomb, Mox Diamond, Crow Mox, like Mox
I
Amber.
don't think I don't think any of the Moxes that make 1 mana count.
So here's my opinion. I think specifically, actually, I would say all the Moxes that only produce 1 mana. The reason why is 2 of the Moxes are 2-for-1s, and then the third, there's a requirement of you need a legendary permanent on the battlefield, right? So
Right. But I actually think you can discount them without having to say any of that. I think that you can exclude them from the list just because they only make 1 mana.
it's the whole
Because
having
you
5
you
mana on turn 2 thing.
that's exactly right. You are, with those cards, you are giving up a card in your hand to advance yourself an extra mana.
Right.
In all of these instances, you are giving up a card in your hand to advance yourself several mana,
Right.
even if it's just 2.
Right.
Because in the math that we do in the early games of Magic, 2 is so much bigger than 1.
Well, I mean,
So
especially with like Mana Crypt as a whole. you go from turn 1 to turn 3 instantly. Where turn 1 to turn 3 is crazy versus turn 1 to turn 2. Makes a huge difference. So
it does. And as far as the other ones that you mentioned, like I mean, you could add Nykthos to that list as well, right?
Sure, yeah.
They're lands. They're lands, and that means that you can't play a land and then that, right?
Right.
What makes these more powerful is that they're not lands.
Right.
Is that they, I mean, obviously there's ways to get around the 1 land per turn rule, but like, the standard is you're only putting 1 land per turn down.
Right.
So, and in all of those cases, they require some setup.
Right.
Like Gaia's Cradle does literally nothing if there's no creatures on board.
That's true. True.
So yes, it's crazy when it works, but it does require a specific kind of setup. These all, and you could make that argument for Dockside, that it also requires a certain game state in order to be relevant.
But I think why Dockside is worse than all of these is because they keep printing clue tokens, they keep printing food tokens, they make junk tokens, they have blood tokens, they have all these things that just so happen to be an artifact. And you could be playing your Hobbit food deck, and I play Dockside Distortion, so I'm getting 20 treasure. Because you can't instantly sack them either. Well, like, effectively. So
it's true.
I think that's why Dockside definitely deserves this place, because with just how many incidental rectangles that happen to be artifacts is extraordinary. So
it is.
But yeah, let's be perfectly real. I think Nadu, you're absolutely right. I think that guy should never have been printed in the first place, but they did it anyway, and it was gonna happen regardless. I think that was like set in stone. But again, like I like my Windgrace deck has 2 of the 3. I don't actually own a Jeweled Lotus, but it would have been in there if I had it. And that deck will still have explosive turns, but it's not going to be turn 3 or turn 4, Kozilek's anymore, which is okay. Like that is okay. And yeah, I think overall this is healthier for the format.
Right. And yeah, I think that it's important to recognize that, like, because we talked about this before, that when you talk about Nadu, it doesn't fit with the rest of the list, but that's just because that is just coincidence.
One of these are not like the others.
Happen at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, look, it actually kind of begs a question. I think, like, I'm curious. They knew that Nadu was coming down the lane. Right, like you're the Commander Rules Committee, and you know that you're probably going to have to ban Nadu because it just sucks out loud and everybody hates it.
Yep.
So that's coming down, and does that at that point spark up the conversation? Like, is it time for us to get serious about looking at some other stuff? And I wonder if there was a bit of a snowball effect here, where we knew we were going to get rid of Nadu, and then we start having the conversation. All right, if we're going to get serious about doing a ban, which we haven't done in a while.
I think the last. What was the last card banned?
What's the next one? Right?
Yeah.
And in my mind, I go, okay, we're going to get rid of Nadu. What else? What else have we been talking about? We've been talking about Dockside.
Yes.
And as soon as the conversation about Dockside comes back up, and they go, well, hey, if we're going to get rid of Dockside, we really ought to look at these other, like, really rambunctious fast mana rocks.
And honestly, do
we really need them in the format?
I honestly think if they slowed it down and just banned Dockside, honestly, I would rather have the Band-Aid just ripped off all at once.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Now that I've been here for a week, I think I'm happier with them just banning all 3 cards now, instead of one now, one in 6 months, and one 6 months after that. Because, like, even banning Dockside, I could imagine it lowering the price of, like, Mana Crypt and stuff, because, like, people are going to be afraid to buy it now. Now that doesn't change. Well, I mean, you know what?
Could
That
have gone the other way though.
it did go the other way. Look at Manifold. Manifold increased like 50%
Yeah.
overnight because of this ban list.
Right.
And I also see why they don't ban that card, because you get 3 mana once and then you lose a life each turn. Now that life each turn isn't a lot, but you also have to pay 4 mana to untap it. So unless if you're abusing it with untapped stuff,
card.
Yeah, unless if you're abusing it with untapped shenanigans,
very different.
It's very different, right? So because like
it's very, very, very different. Although, who knows? We may be finding ourselves coming back and talking about that in the not too distant future, because it has a hurdle. It has a hurdle to get over, but it's not as tall as you think. Well, and so I wonder, if that conversation is going to come up again in the not too distant future.
So one of my initial thoughts,
only time will tell.
So one of my initial thoughts was, is Jessica's Will going to get a ban? Is like Dark Ritual going to get a ban? Because like that's just burst ban. Like I was comparing these to like Jeweled Lotus specifically, like but sure. I think the problem with those in general is there's an upfront cost, right? So for Dark Ritual, that 1 mana makes a huge difference. For Jessica's Will, yes, you're paying 3 and usually getting 7 mana in return, but that initial 3 mana makes a whole difference. And like if you're not like Mountain Mana Crypt Jessica's Will, I think you're doing fine. Like now with this current ban list, that's not happening until turn 2, unless if you're using 2 separate resources in order to get that. Like having like overall, as I said, I think long term, this is going to blow in the wind and people are going to be happy with these bans. I think short term, everyone's upset because of the monetary value that they lost. And I use quotation fingers there, because if you didn't plan on selling them, it wasn't worth anything to begin with.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that, I think, when we get to the next part of the conversation. And I think this is a great time to segue into that.
I 100% agree. So we want to talk about what's kind of happened since the announcement, or what I like to call the nuclear fallout of this ban announcement has happened. So one of the biggest things that we want to talk about is the price of the ban cards dropping as significant as they did, and the backlash from the community. I think those tie hand in hand very well.
They do. And really, like, because I want to start this part of the conversation by talking about like perceived value and actual value, and how when we have things that we perceive to be worth a certain amount of money, that we treat them in a certain way. And every Magic player knows what this feels like when you open up a pack and you have a chase rare in there and you go, oh dang, I just paid $5 for a pack. I don't know what a pack costs. I paid $5 for a pack. And I got a $20 card. I just made $15. I just scratched that old scratch off and won $15.
Well, I want to put a pause on you. I want to put a pause here real quick. So when you have like someone who gifts you a pack, like I usually get booster packs from my grandparents, or not my grandparents, but my in-laws, and I'll open the pack in front of them because they want to know what I got. And the first question they ask is, did you get anything worth any money?
Right.
That is the very first question that they ask. And like, it's the first question on everybody's mind. Like, hey, did I get you a good pack? Was the card worth any money? And
that story just absolutely solidifies the fact that when we are opening packs, we are gambling. And I don't mean that in a Gamblers Anonymous kind of way. As somebody who works in the field of addiction, I can tell you there's a huge difference between scratching a scratch-off ticket and a full-blown gambling addiction. And when we open packs, we just have to recognize that there's an element of gambling to it. There's an element of, I spent this much, or perhaps it was a gift and I spent $0. And I'm walking away with this thing that is worth this much money. But a very simple rule in economics is something is only actually worth money if you can go and get that amount of money for it.
Bingo.
And I'll give you an example of something that happened to me just last week. So I opened up a collector pack of the new set Duskmourn and pulled the rarest possible foil version of Valgavoth, which, as of when I pulled it, was only price I could find for it was $225. I don't think it's worth that much. I don't think I could go and get 225. No one's buying it for $225. That number isn't real. And it's also especially not real if I don't actually go sell it. So, this idea that our cards have a value, we must remember they only have that value when we actually go and sell them. So, that being said, we also know that the market moves, and that when this kind of thing happens, when a ban happens, if a card was worth a certain amount, it is very likely to decrease, especially when it isn't relevant in other formats.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this is what's happening here, is that at least in two of these cases, like, they are completely irrelevant, especially in actually, I think technically
So Jeweled Lotus,
Dockside is,
so they're all so Mana Crypt is only legal in Vintage, and everything else is legal in Legacy. And you can use Jeweled Lotus in Legacy if you double the mana with Doubling Cube, because when you double the mana, it doesn't keep the only spent on your commander. So technically, yes, it works.
so yeah, like, jump through 3 hoops and you got there. But
I'm
like,
used to jumping through hoops, Tim. You know this.
You are. You do. You build Rube Goldberg machines. So yeah, Jewel Lotus effectively dead. Effectively a dead card. Like, not gonna be used in other formats. And the real, like, kicker of that is they printed this specifically in a Commander Master set to very obviously be a powerful card in Commander, and it had a high price tag right from the rip just because of how powerful it was, and now it is effectively dead. Those other cards, Mana Crypt, Dockside, they may have something of a presence in those older formats, but those formats are not particularly highly played. And now, because they're not legal in Commander, there's going to be an abundance of those cards. Now the economics is going to shift where there's actually a huge supply of these cards and people
no
wanting to
demand
unload
for
them.
it.
So the prices of all of these cards is absolutely going to tank.
Yeah. So I think the next thing let's go back to the backlash. Everyone hates this. Okay. Everyone has been grabbing their pitchfork and torches and doing some things that they shouldn't be doing, which is the next part of the conversation that I want to bring up right now. Is there's been death threats and other inappropriate behavior towards the CRC and the CAG members, even though the CAG members had nothing to do with this. Death threats or doxing someone is not okay in any stretch of the words. I cannot be any more clear than this. Do not do it. It is a disgusting thing you could do. Yes, you're allowed to be upset and you're allowed to criticize these decisions, but threatening someone's life over a piece of cardboard is an absolutely absurd thing to do, and you should really reconsider your life choices if that's what you want to do. I cannot make this any more clear.
I agree with you that those are bad ways of processing that information. We can totally agree on that. But I will push back and say it's not just about cardboard. Like, for when, and it may just be the perception of money, but we are talking about money here.
Yes.
When someone makes a decision that negatively impacts me from a financial standpoint, I'm going to be angry with that. If my boss passes me over for a raise, if my grocery store doubles their prices, I'm going to be angry with that. Now, what we do with that feeling is what really matters here. And yes, many of us have both Zombie and I own these cards. Like, I have at least 2 Docksides and at least 1, maybe 2 Jewel Lotuses, and those cards are effectively dead now. And I mean, again, it hurts, but me taking it out on the people who made the decision in a negative way isn't going to change it. And it's
Right.
actually just going to make the situation worse. So what can we do about it to actually make the situation easier for us to bear? That's mostly internal work. That's mostly like, what can I do to kind of find a place of acceptance with this, because it's really outside of our control. But
Right.
please, as Zombie said, don't take it out on the people involved. They are doing the very best they can to again to do a really hard job to keep a very complex and very well loved format in a healthy position, which means making some tough choices
Right.
sometimes.
Yeah, as I said, I can't state clearly enough that that kind of behavior is unacceptable, and and stop immediately if you have done it, and if you were thinking about do it, just don't.
Don't do it. So
Don't do it, people.
go talk to your friends. Okay, go talk to your family. Get it all out in a safe place. Don't take it out on the internet where you're just hurting people.
So why don't you go ahead and discuss the next part of this
Okay,
conversation?
so the next thing I want to talk about is that very quickly the backlash translated into actual action, which was a group starting a petition to reverse the bans and also to fire the CRC, which is a little funny. Zombie and I talked about this because the CRC, as far as we could tell, is an unpaid position.
Mhm.
So, I mean, and you can be fired from that, but it's very goofy to me to add that caveat to it. So, I mean, based on my very cursory research, that petition only had about 5,000 people or signatures on it. You know, when I looked at it a little while ago, that's not an enormous amount, even in the scope of people who play this game. So, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of reasons why one might be upset by this,
Of course.
and part of that being that this does in disproportionately impact the competitive EDH community,
Yeah.
because they are deliberately trying to make their decks as powerful as possible. They're not trying to make sevens, they're trying to make tens. And if
Right.
you're trying to make tens, you want Mana Crypt.
You
And
want
if you're
those
playing red,
explosive
you want
things, right?
Dockside. You want all of those cards in your deck. And so they are both negatively impacted by this. So I'm sure that their membership is probably feeling this burn a lot harder than folks out here in the casual community. Because after my immediate disbelief, like, is this real? My next thought was, I don't really play with those cards anyway.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, yeah, I do play with a like
right.
I'm not even sure the Jewel Lotus is in a deck anymore. I did
It
have it
used
in
to
a
be in
deck for a
Saheeli, but
while.
I don't know if you have it
It
in there anymore.
Well, I felt bad. I was like,
It's
this
true.
card's not casual. This
It's
card's
true.
too powerful. Dockside I kept in there because everybody else seemed to as well.
Well,
Like that
because
was more.
so here's my argument for why Dockside could be seen as casual. I use heavy quotation fingers on this one. Is it because it came into precon first? And
Right.
like if it comes into precon and a lot of people can get it just by getting a precon, I could see how that could be misconstrued as it's a casual card.
Right.
Doesn't mean
And
it
really, like,
is.
it scales. And that's important to note as well. Like, it
Right.
scales because if you are playing a truly casual game and people don't have all those rectangles, it feels like it's doing a whole lot less.
Yeah.
Um, So, as I said, just going back over the reversing and changing the commander ban list petition. You know, creeping towards 5,000. You know, their suggestion is that instead of banning or throwing more cards on the ban list, we need to emphasize the rule zero discussion that can and will avoid most problems that occur at a table of commander. Rule zero, of course, referring to the idea that that there should be a conversation about power level and what everybody is trying to get out of the game through mutual agreement at the beginning of the game.
I will say right here, Rule Zero does not fix that problem. I have played many games on Spell Table, and this is more like on pickup games, right? That this is a problem. But I have played many games on Spell Tables where it's like, hey, we're playing a 6 or 7. You know, we just built this deck. We're experimenting. There's like no mana crypts or anything like this, and then someone drops mana crypt and plays docs. Like it doesn't fix it. People are going to play what they want to play, and sometimes some people just want to pub stomp. Is the term I'm going to use. So
To some I would agree with that to some extent, like especially where we play, because we play online,
yep,
and we all know that the internet adds a layer of anonymity to what you're doing and makes people, let's say, it incentivizes people to act a little less gracefully than they might otherwise.
sure.
When you are in person, like when you are actually sitting across a table from somebody, most people are at least a little less likely to break the social agreement. So, and that's what they're getting at. They're getting at the idea that Rule Zero should be sufficient to make a social contract before you actually sit down to a game. I actually have a couple of problems with that idea myself. There are a lot of people who are not socially equipped to be assertive when faced with something that they do not like.
Right.
So if somebody sits down at a table and says, "I have this really, what are we playing today?" and somebody goes, "Well, I have a 6. It's a updated precon," and somebody else goes, "Yeah, that's right about where I am. I don't have any fast man or anything." Third person consents as well, says basically the same thing, and the fourth person goes, "Well, I have this incredibly really powerful thing that I want to play. Are you okay with me doing that?" Is everyone assertive enough at that point to say, "No, I would really rather you didn't"?
The short
And
answer is I don't think no, because
no.
and like I will say I am okay with it, but my professional background says I should be okay with it, because when you manage people, you're gonna get bounce back like that quite often. And when you're in charge, I'm gonna say that, but like you're not, like, no one's in charge of a commander pod, but like when conflict is just something I have to deal with on a daily basis.
Sure.
So
And
dealing with a little bit of conflict is something that I've dealt with, so
anyone from a customer service background knows this as well, right? Like you have to be able to be assertive in certain situations in order to kind of get everybody on the same page. Like that's it. I mean, yes, management does that as well, but just any environment where you're working with other people and having to collaborate on what you're doing, you have to learn some assertive communication skills. But as somebody again who works in human services, I can tell you that assertive communication skills are the exception, not the rule.
Right.
And that I want, and you and I think are very interested in everybody having a good time. And we are going to kind of be that voice of assertion when we need to be.
Right.
But putting the burden of making the game be what you want it to be through an assertive communication conversation at the beginning of the pod, like, feels
that doesn't bode well
very
with me either.
yeah, like I just don't that's putting the burden on the player to make the game go that you want it to. And this is where I think the philosophical conflict of this whole conversation shows up, where what do we all want Commander to be? And if we want it to be a casual format, it doesn't make sense for there to be a lot of bans, but there are cards that make the format feel less casual. And here we have action taken against those cards and the community pushing back because of financial reasons. Because I think, you and I agree that from a purely cultural standpoint, like from what we think this is going to do to the format, I think it is a net gain. But I also think, if I get really deep into how I think this is going to impact the format, generally speaking, here's my controversial opinion. Are you ready?
Not going to change much.
It's not going to change much.
Not many people are playing it. Only whales like me play these cards, or
yeah. Like I'm gonna go take the Dockside out of my couple of decks, and I'm gonna take the Jeweled Lotus out, and I'm gonna keep it moving. And my decks are gonna play marginally differently, like practically zero. And so, what is it actually going to change? And again, I know if you're a CEDH player, you probably hate me right now. I don't play your game, and this is where we start the conversation about how those things are actually different.
Please let us know, let us know in the comments below what you guys think, because I am very far away from the CEDH. Like,
it's true.
Stratosphere.
We don't play CEDH.
We don't. That's something maybe one day that I want to get into. Just because I have a little spike in me too. Sometimes I just want to be like,
I can get there. We've
But
talked about this a lot. Like I think there will come a time. I've been thinking about it more and more
you know
lately if
what?
my
These
life went to
bans might
full.
make it a little bit easier for me to get in
I make it easier.
because now I don't have to spend $200 on a single card just to fit into the group a little bit better. So it might actually lead me into CEDH now because it's slightly more affordable.
And wouldn't like it.
Holy crap! What did we just
Who
come
could
up with?
argue that that's a bad thing? And again, like obviously these are just our opinions, and maybe the people who are in that community feel differently about it, but maybe this lowers the barrier for entry up for more people to play CEDH, and actually ends up being a net good for that community as well.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead into the next one. There's not gonna be too much to discuss about this, but I still want to bring it up anyway. This week, two members of the CAG have quit the CAG. So, I don't want to name drop because that's not really my place. If you really want to find out who it was, go ahead and just Google search CAG quitting CAG or people quitting CAG or something. You'll
Right.
use the internet. It's out there. Use it.
Yeah,
What?
learn how to use the internet, okay? We don't have to do everything for you.
We should, but we're not going to. Um.
Just a
So.
reminder, when we say CAG, we're talking about the Commander Advisory Group.
Right.
This is basically the group of content creators or talking heads or people who talk about the game who are meant to act as advisors. Again, advisory group. They're meant to act as advisors to the Commander Rules Committee. They don't have any formal power. They are just meant to
To
contribute
give their
and
opinions and stuff. Yeah.
right. And it was very clearly stated that they were not brought into this conversation, at least not during the actual conversation about the ban. They did apparently like this, they're always part of the conversation about what might happen in the future. But when it came time to actually make the choice, there was no consultation with the CAG. And we'll actually talk about that in more greater detail in just a moment. But we want to acknowledge that these two members of the CAG that quit, both of them said in their statements that neither of them mentioned the situation specifically.
Right.
And I think that you might say that this could be coincidence. It seems too close together to
I don't know.
me to be a
Occam Razors
coincidence.
tells me other things.
Right, like Occam's razor says the most obvious answer is usually the right one. And so in this case, if the CAG felt like they were left out of the loop on this and that the CRC made an earth-shattering decision that they didn't even get asked about, I might feel some kind of way about that. So we're not saying that's what happened, but sure looks
It
like it
feels
from a
like
certain
that.
point of view.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't really have much to add other than like, I mean, if like if I wasn't personally, if I wasn't informed with this decision at all, and then it just kind of happened, I could see wanting to quit too, because especially with the backlash that the community has brought on absolutely everyone that even that weren't in this decision making process. Like I volunteered for this and I'm getting death threats for something that I wasn't even involved with. Like
That's right.
like I wouldn't want to deal with that and I would quit too.
Yeah, separate yourself from it, get as far away from it as possible. It's fascinating to recognize that it got that much backlash. It's really wild.
Yeah. So
So, other side of the coin, little glimmer of hope here. So I wanted to acknowledge that one of the headlines I read this week was that some of the sellers, some of the big card companies, started offering refunds if you bought any of the cards from this ban list within a certain amount of time. It's different based on the seller,
so
and most of the time they're just giving you store credit for it.
sure.
And ultimately, like there's hoops that you have to jump through, but they don't have to do that at all.
Nope.
Like they don't have to do that at all.
Nope.
So and obviously they wouldn't be doing it if they didn't feel like there was some benefit to it. I mean, if you're a for-profit organization, you're for profit. So if that's your guiding
I mean, the
light.
benefit is
But
that they're going
my
to still
point
get the
is
money
that
from it,
like
but yeah.
I really think that it was cool of them
Oh,
to make that
absolutely.
choice in whatever limited way that they did. I really think that the people who get burned the most by this are the people who bought their Mana Crypt last month. My wife has been like threatening to buy me a Mana Crypt for like a birthday present for
Ooh.
years now. It hasn't happened just out of random happenstance. And now I told her
Don't
on
do
Monday,
it.
I said, "Hey, you remember that thing that you were talking about maybe buying me for my birthday? Don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it. Yeah. So I think it's amazing that these sellers are doing it. And honestly, like just getting store credit back means they're still going to get their money from them. So like, did it cost them anything? No, not really. Um, Now if they're able to keep the card too, that would be weird. But like, I do want to ask, hey, Card Kingdom, I bought my Mana Crypt like 5 years ago. Can I get full store credit for it? Because that would be great. Just kidding.
Yeah, yeah. Can
I
we
still want to
stretch
keep
that a
it.
little bit?
How long? No. No, I'm still going to keep my Mana Crypt because I have hope for it one day. Anyway. Uh so the commander or the rules committee did release a FAQ about this because of the backlash, they wanted to kind of get answers to the questions that they were constantly getting. So we're going to like kind of rapid fire through these questions. We'll discuss
highlight some stuff that
it's
we
the highlight
noticed.
reels. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first question was, did the rules committee sell any of their cards before the banning to avoid any loss of value? And no.
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 No. I gotta point this out. Like the first sentence in the response is no.
No.
Because remember, folks, no is a complete sentence.
Will the rules committee roll back these changes? Do you listen to the audience? No, they're not going to roll this back.
Oh, so this is a no, then a yes, though. Like, no, we're not rolling it back. Yes, we listen to you. It feels very pandery. It just does. Like,
Yeah.
No, baby, no, I'm not gonna change it back. But I'm listening. I hear you.
I hear you, but it's not going to change. And honestly, I would be upset if they did. Like, if they went back and changed it and did it, I think I would be more upset with them for doing that, for backpedaling and pandering to the masses. I would be more upset with the rules committee than I am now.
And that's why they can't win here.
No, it's a lose situation.
They can't win. So it makes way more sense to just put their heads down and get through it.
Take it on the chin.
Let it. That's right. Let the fallout occur, and then in a couple of months.
I was about to say because in 6 months this conversation is going to in 2 months this conversation is going to be over. Everyone's going to have accepted their losses, and we're going to move on and play some more Commander. Or if you really think that this is the death of Commander, I'm sorry to see you go, but it's really not.
We'll keep a chair warm for you.
Yeah, we will, because we really want you back, but so long. Anyway.
Only if you want to be here. So yeah, the third question is why didn't you give any advance notice of the change? And they actually responded with, "We'll own this one. This could have been done much better." And then they go over their policy about advance notice. I mean, I appreciate them for saying that they own it, that they could have done it better. But there really is a part of me that doesn't understand this thinking. Like, how can you make an advance notice about a ban? And again, why would that change anything?
So
because the markets move so quickly. So if you announced it in advance, the markets would shift immediately. So they would either shift when you announced it that it was going to happen, or they shift when you announce it and it's happening now. So I don't see if the argument on the other side is you screwed me financially. Giving advance notice doesn't fix that.
So here's where I've been listening to absolutely everyone and their mom talk about this before this, because again, I was trying to get as much information as possible before we decided to record our episode. And they're saying they should have a watch list of cards that are on their like watch list that they might potentially ban in the future to prevent, like, either to prevent people from buying it or anything like that. But like, again, that doesn't work, because like if you have something on your watch list and you don't ban it, like, then what's the point of the watch list? If you put it on the watch list and then it gets banned, then you feel bad because you still bought the card. And like overall, like, I don't think a watch list works. Like, I just don't think it does.
Yeah,
And
and they gave a couple of reasons for the same.
they also have
Hmm.
mentioned Dockside in the past. So
Yep.
they have. They didn't mention Mana Crypt or Jeweled Lotus, but they've already talked about some of these cards, and it's still like, yes. And honestly, I don't think they could have done it better. And if there's like, if people say, "Oh, we should slow roll this," please just rip the band-aid off and just get it over with. Like, you don't.
I just don't see the benefit. Like
I
I
don't see
don't
it
think it
either.
would actually have the impact that they think it would. And they address the watch list here and why they think it is something that doesn't work. And again, I think at this point they're just kind of pandering. And I'm not actually trying to say that as though it were a negative. I just don't think that they have another line to take here.
Well,
It's
it's like,
really
what
at
can
this
they do?
at That's right. With everybody just being mad at this point, all they can really do is go like, "Listen, we get it. We get it.
This
It's
sucks.
happening anyway. Yeah, this
This
sucks.
sucks, but
It's happening.
suck it up, Buttercup.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, yeah, advance notice would never work. So we're gonna go ahead and we talked enough about this question. So will you give Nance notice of changes in the future? And Nance, like, the concept, they specifically said they're warming up to the awareness of bans, but like, no, it just doesn't work. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of these questions are just the same question asked in a
I'd
different
love
way.
for them to try it. Like like just to, before we move on from this one, I'd love them to try it just to see. Does it actually change it if you say, "Hey, we're gonna ban Mox Diamond in 3 months"?
Oh, I mean, I
Like,
first of all, I wouldn't sell my Mox Diamond anyway. I bought it for $80, which
sure,
is
but
amazing.
like, like I just want to, as an experiment, see what it does. I can't help but
The
feel
market's
like almost
crashing right away.
almost the exact same thing is happening. The financial service of it is immediately going to crash, and people are going to be mad.
Yep.
You just made me mad for 3 extra months.
Boop. Hit the one right on the
Uh,
nose.
so that the next one's in the similar vein. Why didn't you ban cards one at a time? See how that went. But they were trying to make a significant shift. The slow drip would have diluted the impact of that shift that they were trying to make. As I described it before, if you think of the four cards, Soul Ring, Dockside, Jeweled Lotus, Mana Crypt being the four most impactful fast mana things, cutting three of them out effectively restricted the concept. And I know that's really broad strokes. It's not as simple as that, but
Agreed.
that's
Agreed.
what they were trying to do.
And
Did what?
yeah, I think doing it one at a time just makes it worse for everybody because, like,
Mhm.
because when they do it one at a time, the real question that you start asking yourself is, okay, what's next?
What's next? That's exactly right.
Instead
So
of
that
saying, hey, we did it all
that
now,
actually
we're done.
that creates really bad market. Like that messes with the market in maybe an even worse way.
Yeah. So now it's okay, we're done. We did what we needed to do. We're not going to target anything else. We are very clear on that. I think slow rolling it would have been a bad idea as well,
Yeah.
if not worse.
Next, they asked, did WotC know that these cards might be banned when they printed so many of them again in 2023? Short answer is no. Like, they just recently, first off, they plan to print cards several years in advance. That's the way that the card
Yep.
cycle works. And also, they only recently decided to make the bans. They haven't been sitting on the thing for a long time.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to do that. Like, it
Right.
really, there's no, because you can't have it both ways. You can't say, how dare you rip off the band-aid, and also, how dare you slow roll this.
Yeah.
It
Also,
isn't, it can't be both.
well, also, it's not like they get paid by Wizards.
Right.
If they got paid by Wizards, I could see this being a valid question. But since they're just a volunteer group of people that just love this game and this format, to say that they slow rolled this because WotC decided to print these cards is ridiculous. Like,
The rest of them get progressively more petty. The questions that they're answering. So
yeah.
just as a warning, well, and I know that we're making light of this to some extent, but there's a part of us that just like we really kind of feel that some of the backlash is petty. So I
Mhm.
mean, I understand that it has to do with money and that is like causing people's feelings to come up in a really big way. if your financial situation is hinged on your Magic collection, there's some bad news. Like,
Let's make some wiser choices here.
you got to do some work in some other areas there. So the next one is, did you ban these cards specifically because they're expensive? And their answer is like, no,
No.
that's backwards. They're not powerful because they're expensive. They are expensive because they're powerful.
Let's learn how the market works, right?
Did you ban these cards specifically to target CEDH? This one is the most mind-blowing question to me. Like, what? First off, so many people want to argue that CEDH and EDH are the same format, and by all technicalities, they are. So, but to what end? To what end?
Right?
Why? Why? In any right mind would you deliberately do something to negatively impact a small subgroup of the player group?
Okay, so look, this is old news, but when they banned Flash, what, 5, 6, 7 years ago, or however long ago it was, is the CEDH community asked for that card to be banned. They said specifically that we don't normally do this. We will do it this once, and we don't target CDH, period. That's not in our discussion. And a lot of CDH players, from what I understand, they're just excited to make as powerful decks as possible in this particular format. So from what it sounds like, they don't want a separate ban list. And that's like, so no, this isn't for CDH players at all. Like, I don't know why you would think that to begin with.
And again, like, if we have to ask ourselves, like, what is the purpose of the CRC? And it is, spiritually speaking, to try and keep the format as close to the goal of being a casual format that everybody can play, to keep that goal, to keep the format as close to that goal as possible. And so if they felt like these cards were leaning too far into the competitive realm, then removing them aligns with that philosophy. The problem is that we already have this subgroup of players who have focused their deck building on building the most powerful thing possible, and that's where CEDH was born of. And it isn't what most people play, but it is what a large portion play. And so they are the ones that are going to be most negatively impacted by this, no question. So,
Right.
but the word that I have to stomp on here is the word targeted. Like, did they do it deliberately to stick one on the side of the CEDH? Why would anyone in their right mind do that? It just
Yeah,
doesn't
it
make
just
any
seems
sense.
bizarre to me. Yeah. So
And then they follow that up by asking, do they care that it damages the CEDH? Like, yes, they care. What kind of question is that? Like, I was joking with Hoppy before. Like, how many puppies have you killed today? Like,
are you
what?
gonna kill more puppies today?
Yeah. Like, at what time are you going to kill your next puppy?
Yeah,
Like,
like
just, it's a trap. That question is just such a trap. Like, do you even care? Do you even care that people are hurting?
it's
Like,
it's
this is the definition of leadership. Like, people in leadership positions have to make hard choices. And those hard choices, and they're hard because they almost always negatively impact someone to some extent. And they're just trying to mitigate the negative impact. And what they're looking at here is that the negative impact of these cards being in the format is greater than the negative impact of removing them.
yeah.
And you may not agree with their assessment, with their math, but that is what they have decided.
So I think the next question is actually a pretty solid question.
It is.
So why wasn't the CAG told about the bans or consulted about these bans? Long story short, they consulted them about the concept of it, but not specifically the cards themselves. They said, "Hey, what are your problems? Like, do you have problems with fast mana in the Commander format?" And it was an overwhelming yes. So then they decided to then make this decision themselves, and which another part. So part of this also bothers me is there used to not be a CAG. So this is back when like Sheldon Menery was a part of it and all that stuff, and it wasn't these newer, younger people. But like overall, like they don't necessarily need to ask these questions to make these decisions. And like, I can understand not wanting leaks to happen or anything like this, because I mean, these decisions do take time. And when you don't have any legally binding things to prevent people from talking, people will talk. That's what people do.
Yep.
So yes, I could see them not trusting. Like, what's the like? I understand the question. What's the point of the CAG if they don't use the CAG? Well, my answer is they didn't have the CAG all the time, and when it comes to sensitive information, sometimes the less people know, the less likely it's a leak. The best way to keep a secret is to kill everyone that knows it.
Yeah, there's no great answer to this one. Like, there's no way of framing this in a way that doesn't feel negative on some axis, but you're absolutely right. If their job is to make sure that this information doesn't get out, it makes a lot of sense not to include them, and really like but it also demonstrates a significant lack of trust for that other part
It's
of
a
the
double-edged sword.
organization.
It's a
It
double-edged
really
sword.
is. That's what I'm getting at. Like, there's just no way that you can have both, where it's
Nope.
like you can have full security and also, full, and be able to tell people and include them in the conversation with full security, not knowing that there's no risk
Because
that somebody's going to let
if
it
everyone was,
hang.
let's say if everyone was paid by Wizards of the Coast and then they didn't use another department or whatever to help to make this decision, then there's a problem. However, these are all volunteer positions. There's no like there's no gain to any of this by like potentially making things way worse. So keeping it small and keeping it secret seems right to me. So
it's a tough choice, and I can see why people may or may not agree with it. But at the end of the day, like, if you want to keep it a secret, it does mean not. But it also sends that lack of trust message, so it's tough. Then the final question on our old FAQ here is are other expensive cards safe from being banned? And no.
yeah. So their
Nothing is
exact
safe.
response is yes, but not absolute beyond reproach, which means for now,
Which
yes,
means
but
no.
no, not always.
It means no. It means no. And listen, folks, safety is relative. Safety is a perspective. Are your cards safe from being safe from being banned? No, not if they're powerful. Things could change at any moment. We might end up with 2 separate ban lists next week. That's not going to happen, but it could.
I think now would be the best time. Like, it would be interesting to see, because they did mention that they're trying new things for the next announcement or whatever. It would be interesting to see if they were like, okay, now let's see what if we were to have a CDH ban list and a commander ban list, and then have it like this is CDH and this is commander, and have 2 separate completely different formats, because that actually solves a lot of, I mean, I think it's a little too late now because the monetary crash already, and then people getting rid of things, and if then they decide to have a separate format that's run by the same people or whatever, then those cards aren't banned for that. People are going to want to buy them, and those prices are going to raise again, so people are going to lose out on even more money. So I think it's too late. If they were to have said, hey, this is what we're doing, we're making a separate commander, or like a commander ban list and a CDH ban list, this is the new commander, this is the commander ban list, this is the CDH ban list. I think it's too late now, but I think it would have been interesting to try it that way. But no, of course your cards aren't going to be safe. Like who knows what Wizard's going to print next week, because that's when the next set comes out. It seems like it's always next week. We don't know what that's going to do with older cards, right? Like,
right.
Wizards tries to do things like this where they look at other formats or like older cards, but they're not perfect. No one's perfect. So yes, they're going to make dumb decisions and print cards like Nadu, where it turns Lightning Greaves into a fucking sick value engine. But
yeah, or even like the other 0 equipped things that were just bunk. up until the printing of Nadu. Like that happens all the
I mean,
time.
they
There's
make
something
mistakes
that.
all the time. Like, look at Skull Clamp.
Hmm.
That was the biggest mistake
Hmm.
of the 2000s, and it's my favorite mistake of the 2000s. Okay, but that's not the point. The point is they've Wizards has been making mistakes for a very long time. And they're not going to stop because no one's perfect. This game is very fluid, and there's lots of like other crazy things that happen, and sometimes they're not going to think of things. So no, your cards aren't safe, but they're not looking to ban more right now. Like that's exactly what
No,
they
and
say.
yeah, that's what they say, and I like that. That would be my prediction on top of it is that like this was huge. It's been a while since we've had a commander ban, so like this, and this is out there. I don't know if we've ever had one that was quite this significant. So I have to imagine that we're not going to see something else that's like really because this isn't a format like modern where you ban one thing and suddenly something else becomes
Mhm.
problematic because it was the other thing was keeping it in check. That's
Right.
not what's going to happen here. None of
No.
these are other than Nadu. None of the Nadu's the only commander on the list.
Right.
So is the format going to warp completely now that Nadu's gone? I don't think
No,
so.
of course not.
Yeah, I've never even played against that card.
Nope,
Not
neither have
once.
I. Now, to be
Zero
fair, I
times.
haven't been able to play as much as I would like as of recently.
Okay.
So, like, I haven't maybe necessarily seen it out in the wild, but like, also some of these cards were like, I mean, let's be real. A lot of these cards were self-regulating already. So,
Hmm.
so all right. Before we go further, we're gonna go into the last topic, and we're just gonna kind of discuss more of what we think about the bans and the situation as a whole.
Yeah. So
Um,
final thoughts, basically. Closing. What's your closing argument?
My closing argument is no, I don't think these cards necessarily needed to be banned, but now that they are banned, I'm okay with it. Like it's
Hmm.
just like some things don't self-regulate. Mana Crypt was one of those cards that don't self-regulate. Like Dockside was one of those cards that didn't self-regulate. But like mass land destruction is a card that's self-regulated, so it doesn't need to be banned, and you don't need to ban every single card that says destroy all lands because people know it's not fun. Heavy stacks pieces, yes, they're salty as hell, and sometimes people use them, but like overall, they self-regulate. People don't want to have that experience. So like sometimes you just need to say, no, this is enough. And like honestly, I also think this was like a little swat on the nose to Wizards saying, "Hey, stop printing cards like this. We don't want it. We don't need it. Stop it." Bad Wizards. Like
I hope they take the hint.
so I mean, I love powerful cards, but like I'm okay with these powerful cards being gone. Yes, I lost about 300, $400, but I didn't plan on selling these cards anyway until after I did, and that's not my problem anymore. So, am I being too cynical about this? Like, like
Yeah,
uh,
well, I mean that's part of the value conversation, right? These cards are like worth this amount of money, but I'm not going to sell them, so no, they're not.
I just bought a
Yeah,
shirt that says my deck is worth more than my car. Um, so I'm one of those people, and now Windgrace isn't valued as high because I don't have Mana Crypt and Dockside in it. But here we are. Like it's okay. I'll find something else more expensive to put in there anyway. So
yeah. I mean, I'm with you. Again, my immediate reaction was, "Is this real?" And then my second reaction was, "Eh."
eh,
And I know that that's just me being in the privileged chair that I am right now because I don't really have money invested in these cards. In I don't have money invested in these cards. I do own a couple of these cards, but I don't consider that to be money invested in them.
yeah, I don't
So
look at Magic as an investment
it
either.
doesn't hurt me in a way that it might hurt some other folks where they feel really burned. I've burned myself in the past, man. I bought
There was
four
this one
Gideons.
time. There was this one time I traded for a Emrakul, the Promise End, when it was legal and
Uh,
standard. Literally the next day, it got
it
banned, and
got banned.
it got the price dropped literally 50%. So it's like, well, um, uh, I lost a lot of money on that trade because those were like the cards that I traded for were cards that I could have potentially used somewhere else.
Right. And I've made my share of bad purchases in the past, bought a card for a certain amount of money and then had it completely tank because I was prospecting and I thought the card was going to be great and then it wasn't. Or, I've had the reverse happen as well, where I got a card that I thought was good, and I bought it for cheap and then it ended up increasing in value. But unless I'm trading it off, it doesn't really have that increased
So,
value.
so, so
I think that the actual day-to-day difference that this is going to make is marginal at best. I definitely feel for the people who had a significant financial loss as a result of this. That is the nature of
true.
the secondary market, and I do feel for that. That's a terrible situation to be in, and there's no easy answer. There's no way out of it. There's no consolation I can offer that's going to make it any better. When I look at this from a larger lens, from kind of the macro level, I really don't see this having a gigantic impact on the format as a whole. If there's one really big net positive, is that I think it is going to continue to fuel the conversation about having a different ban list for for
Agreed.
CEDH and EDH. Do we need to actually start looking at them as different formats? Because I'm very curious to know from the CEDH community, like many of them said before that they didn't want separate ban lists. If the option was ban these 4 cards or consider a second ban list, do you feel differently?
I'm curious on what would have been said, right? Like, and that's
Hmm.
part of like what. So here's where I think that the answer is kind of already answered in the decision that they made, because one of the people in the rules committee is from the Spike Feeders, which is a CDH, like
Okay.
a CDH channel. So I think the short answer is it's kind of answered already.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah. I think I've been desensitized this to a little bit, because a long time ago I know I did the big no and played the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, and the Yu-Gi-Oh market was crazy. Like, for some reason, Yu-Gi-Oh cards were always super expensive, and I've been hit with bans in the past. So like, I know what it's like to spend $200 on a card and then 3 weeks later it gets banned. Like, I've been through that before in my life. So like, this isn't new to me. So I've dealt
Mhm.
with things like this before. So to me, losing this money um isn't as bad. Yeah, it sucks, but again, I didn't plan on selling them. I didn't plan on trading them. So there's more of a sentimental value to these cards versus a monetary value to these cards.
Yeah, it still hurts no
Yeah, it
matter
hurts.
which way you no
Love
matter no
hurts.
matter which way you slice it.
Love
It does.
hurts.
It does. All right. So I think we've said enough for one day. What do you think?
Oh my god, I think we said too much for one day.
Said way too much, probably. So please don't hate us. These are just opinions of
Yep.
two very well off and whaley type guys.
And
So
you know what? If you're
so
angry with us, tell us in the comments below and we'll tell you how wrong you are.
yeah, yes. Boost our algorithm.
Yes, yes.
Excellent.
Do the YouTube things and tell us all about that in the comments below.
So, friends, opponents, cardboard day traders, thank you so very kindly for joining us today on the Headgates Commander podcast. We are always grateful for your support. Remember, you can help out this show by watching our podcast and all of our other videos over on YouTube, joining our streams on both YouTube and Twitch, and hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Feel free to comment in the description, comment below, and links to anything that we talked about also in the description.
But before we scoop things up, we want to hear from you in the Think Tech. What are your thoughts on the recent bans? Who would have thought that's the question I would ask? I was going to ask how your day was, but by reading the script, this is what I saw. So sorry to hear that. Are these bans better than creating a separate ban list for EDH and CEDH? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for playing along with us and have a wonderful day. Bye.